In this scenario, from beat to quarters, we recreate a hypothetical but historically grounded, we hope, encounter off the Spanish coast in 1801. Two brigs of roughly equal size and firepower cross paths while patrolling the Mediterranean. The Spanish brig, 400 tons burden, armed with 12-pounder long guns and 6 carronades, is manned by a seasoned crew of 109. Her opponent, a British brig of 382 tons, carries 16 32-pounder carronades and 2 6-pounder bow chasers, with a full complement of 120. Both vessels have a turn rate of 9 under the rules, being small ship, brig-sized ships, and both crews operate with a gunning modifier of 1.0. This is because we decided that the Spanish crew would be patrol veterans. Not all Spanish ships would be inexperienced. We're thinking some of them would have experienced crew, especially smaller ships. So 1.0 for both ships and gunnery modifier. Both ships are based on historical real ships. We don't have any evidence that they ever encountered each other, but as we said, this is a hypothetical. Both were stationed in the area at the time. The Vigilante, the Spanish brig, were captured in 1805, I think, and served with the British after that. It was in the Caribbean. And we have the HMS Seagull, which is typical for this class of brigs, with this very, very heavy close-range broadside. But so we'll see how it all plays out. The Spanish have the advantage at range, and the British have advantage at close range. So wind, we rolled, and it came from the north blowing to the south. We used our system where we rolled for sides, splitting the table in 8 compass directions and seeing which side the ship starts from. We're now starting from the same side again, and then we split that side into another 3 parts. And as you can see here at the start of turn 1, because the British set up in the sector closest to the wind, so she has the weather gauge. So this opening round, the first turn, sees both captains, the Spanish and the British, yoking a bit for the wind. Of course, the British has the weather gauge, as mentioned, and the British brig, approaching from windward, maintains a broad reach and aims to close the distance quickly, trying to get in range for her carronades to work. And also the Spanish brig is like staying off a little bit, just trying to get her 12-pounders to bear early to maybe cause some early damage to the British, crippling her. So that is basically it for turn 1. As you can see in beat quarters, we're moving simultaneously, and that's a really cool thing. That's one of the things we really like about it. You need to plan ahead, so you make a plan on the paper, and I'll show you a little bit cut in here of how that can look. So those are our plans for the first couple of turns, and you plan that on paper and then you play it out. If you get too close, then you switch over to this phased action where you split each turn into 5 segments, just to make sure that things happen in the right order. But at further range, you just play it out. So turn 2, and the gap narrows. Both crews prepare for action, and then the Spanish get in her early broadside. So that's Marcus planning and deciding that he wants to throw this early broadside. Initial broadsides are slightly more effective. There is a modifier for an initial broadside. The crews are prepped and ready to fire that. Unfortunately, for the Spanish player here, this first broadside is largely ineffectual. It's scoring 29 points of damage to the British, 29 points to the hull, and then another 5 points went into the rigging. So that's nothing significant, but it's a small initial broadside to start the combat. So the British brig responds and had also planned to fire in this turn, and so you see here, since Marcus had decided to fire, but you can decide when you're going to fire, when it's just an open turn, not a phased. So as Marcus' ship came into range. He fired earlier than the British ship, and now the British ship responds. And that's a fairly close range broadside, and it scores pretty well. It does a devastating 91 points of damage to the hull of the Spanish brig, and another 13 points ends up in the rigging. So certain percentage would end up, we were playing with this extra rule where a certain percentage at longer ranges would end up in the rigging. And we're actually using the app that I constructed for the game, where so most of these rolls we're not doing with dice, we're just doing it on our cell phones actually with this app. Calculating the damage, seeing if a mast is damaged, if it falls over, and so on. So most of that is automated. We felt that really worked because we could really focus on just playing the game, planning out our moves ahead. And this is the thing, again, why we keep coming back to Bitter Quarters, is because you have this thing where you make your plans, you see the wind in the beginning of the turn, and then you make your plan and your moves, and then, but you never really, it's much harder to know what the opponent is planning. Of course, you have the wind, you have the weather gauge, but it feels a little bit more like the real thing, because you really never know. Like, the opponent will take you on some twists and turns. So we're on turn 3 here, and again, little shorter range, and the British ship gets into range and decides the Spanish ship gets into range and decides to fire. And that's a much closer broadside, and it does a lot more damage actually. So it does 78 points of damage to the hull, and another 4 points ends up in the rigging. And so as this damage occurs over the game, you will have a certain number once that's passed each time. So you have a sail value number. I've described this in the past. So each time you hit that number, for instance on the British brig, so if I take 84 points of damage to the rigging, then I lose a sail. And losing a sail is not good. You're going to get less speed and so on. But also there's a chance, if it's a lower sail, that whole section goes. And if that section goes then of the mast, then the whole mast will go. You also have a gun damage number. The gun damage number, each time you reach that, you will lose a gun. We've automated all this so that when you, with the app, lose a gun, it calculates which gun, depending on which side is facing the opponent. If it's a rake from the bow or the stern, then you can hit any side of the guns. The British response here, just have to fill that in, and so it does very little. It was a bad roll for me. So just 41 points of damage at this close range, and none of that goes into the rigging. So it's all ending up on the ship at 41 points of damage. But as this happens, there is guns. So for instance, Marcus' ship is taking 91 plus 41. His gun damage number for the Spanish brig is 44. So each time he hits 44, he's going to lose a gun. He's also going to lose crew, because we have that's actually a house rule that we implemented. So each time you lose a gun, you can lose 0 to all of that gun crew. And the gun crews are in the rules, like how many crew are needed to operate a certain gun. So you have a crew needing a certain number of crew to operate the rigging or the sails, and if you don't have the full complement for that, it's going to affect your handling and your speed and so on. But you also have to have crews, the gun crews, to handle your guns, right? And if you lose a gun, then you could lose the whole gun crew. The gun explodes or gets knocked over, everyone gets killed, or maybe you lose none. The gun is temporarily knocked out of action, and you lose no extra crew. And you see here is the turn marker, so you use that to see how many points to turn. And planning out the action in advance, most of these turns, since we ended up pretty close, are played in phased action. So each turn is divided into 5 phases. There is other ways to do that in the rules, and when I talk to Barry, he has other suggestions. We tend to play it like this because we just find it very much fun. I also talked to Barry about it. Like, in the end, we like the system as it is. So here on turn 4, the only thing that bears, I planned to fire broadside, but there was no situation where broadside could fire, but my bow chasers, they bore. So the British brig fires her, so HMS Seagull, fires her bow chasers and does 5 points of damage to the Spanish brig. So, but as this battle goes, as I described with the guns, we're losing guns. So a broadside that is exposed to the enemy a long time and he's firing on the hull, you're going to be losing a lot of cannons. You're also going to start taking a bit of damage to the rigging, since a certain amount, a certain percentage, and we've made this random, so it's not a set value, but in the app it could be 0 to a certain amount. So at the longer range, there's a lot of shot that probably end up in the rigging, even if you're aiming for the hull. So then there's a higher percentage that could end up there, but it could still be that all the shot hits the hull, right? So there's some randomness played into this. The whole battle went pretty fast. We've upped the speed here a bit for the battle report, but the whole battle went pretty fast because of this using the app. So we're not spending all our time calculating stuff and so on. We are focusing on commanding our ships. Lots of fun. It's a quick battle, just 2 small ships, but like unrated ships. But since there is this whole dimension with the different armaments, and that each gun counts, and you have the crew and everything, a lot of fun. We also had planned, because I am making a boarding system, like a complete separate boarding system. So if there was a boarding, which it turned out there wasn't, then we would play it out using that system. The plan is to use 6mm figures and then some mini maps, and each 6mm figure would be mounted on a base, and the base with a couple of figures would be like, oh yeah, this is the midshipman base, and this is the post captain base or the officer base, and this is a topman base, and this is a Royal Marine base, and so on. After the battle, we tested this out. Okay, so sorry, got sidetracked there, but here we have a rake actually, and a rake will do more damage. So this is a stern rake, and a stern rake is pretty famous in Age of Sail. That's where you want to end up. You want to get a stern rake on your enemy, and this did a lot of damage. So at this point, the Spanish brig is starting to take quite a bit of damage. I was trying to, this time around, I was trying to maneuver into this position, and I was just very lucky that it turned out that way. It did 118 points of damage, and only 2 points went into the rigging. So that's a lot of damage. You have this hull value number, and that's how much basically HP or life that your ship has, and that's basically your mass tons burden, and then you multiply that by 2. So the Spanish brig have 800, and so she's taking 91, 41, 518. So already now she's taking quite a bit of damage, and that leads to you losing surrender points. We decided that we started the battle with an equal number of surrender points, and that would be 10 surrender points for each ship. So they were roughly equal as the battle started. It turns out those carronades are devastating, and they were devastating in reality. So again, it didn't play out like we thought fully because of because the British brig managed to maneuver into close range where her carronades could bear, and that maybe a little bit the fact that she started with the weather gauge. So maybe replaying this with the Spanish, having the weather gauge could be interesting. But as you see here, Marcus is almost getting away. The Spanish brig is widening the gap here and turning away from the British brig, the HMS Seagull, maybe trying to lick her wounds, repair the rigging here, like widening the distance. And this, I didn't plan for this. He is actually, when you're spending one turn beating into the wind, the turn after that you're allowed to make your attack. An attacking maneuver is just played out fully. You just turn as many points as you have. Maximum turn points is 9 on the spot, basically. And also you turn the ships from the front in this game, as you remember, maybe. So you spend 1 turn, 2 turns, depending on how long, until you get again off the wind on the other tack, and then immediately you move half your beating distance. So you have a certain distance depending on the wind, and in this case we had a pretty strong wind in this battle, so we were moving pretty fast. So you will have a bit of a move, even beating into the wind. So you just turn into the wind, but you need to spend the turn before beating. If you end up turning into the wind and being stopped or in irons without planning it, then you're in a whole world of trouble in Big Two Quarters. That is a very bad situation. And this is what Marcus is performing here. So he is making a attacking maneuver. He spent a round before beating, so in turn 7 he is turning. He didn't quite get fully out of wind, but before the British caught up to him. But he did turn out of wind. So after, since it was in phases, right? So in the first phase he would be turning, and then in the second phase he would be moving out of the wind, and immediately he's finished his maneuver, he can like fire, you know. But in the middle of the attacking maneuver, probably the crew would be busy with attacking. So that's the way we play. So while you're doing that turn, we're not allowing fire, but the minute you're done with the movement, you're allowed to fire your guns. So at this point here, as he's making his turn, and he's not really out of the turn yet, we were working that out, how it would work, trying to get out of the wind. And that was, this is actually the turn, this is turn 8. So she in turn 7 was the move forward and fire, didn't work. Then turn 8, the British brig moves 16 centimeter and fire. And the Spanish is still tacking. He's still in his tacking maneuver here. So this is where the British gets close and to deliver her final broadside for the game, as it turns out. And this is, as you can see, a very close broadside. So that this is a point blank range broadside, which means that a lot of the shot will just hit. It will all hit the hull. There's nothing going into the rigging at this range. And the roll on the phone was like on our shot randomizer was also a heavy one, so she did 224 points of damage to the Spanish brig, and that turned out was enough for her to strike her colors. So and that this class of bridge or a brig was very common in the British Navy at this point. This is a Cruizer-class, and they had these 32-pounder carronades. So that would mean that they routinely outgunned their opponents at close ranges because of that heavy armament. And even though this encounter is fictional, it is grounded somewhat in the tactical and real Mediterranean skirmishes that happened there between 1800 and end of 1801, where the treaty was signed. So there was a time where there was no combat between the Spanish and the British, and then it ensued again in 1803, right? The 12-pounders, they didn't get to play the role. I would guess this could play out a bit differently, since the ranges are quite a bit shorter for carronades in the game. So if the Spanish brig would have had the weather gauge, maybe we should replay it where the Spanish has that. So if she has the weather gauge, maybe she could play her long guns to her advantage, getting hits in. You chip away at your opponent quite well, also at the distance in this game. You hurt the gun crews, you damage the guns. You could also go for crippling the rigging, which could go pretty fast. You get a good hit and you get past the sail value number, and then you might end up taking out the mast. That was the whole battle report, folks. I hope you enjoyed it and join us for the next one. We just wanted to show you again a little bit of Beat the Quarters. We keep playing this game because we do have a lot of fun. And my plan is with this app, I have something else with Beat the Quarters that is a bigger announcement, I hope, which is hopefully going to make a lot of you happy, but that will be later on. But for now, also the app, I'm working on this, so maybe when it's done, I'll just release it to you guys, and so you can use that when you're playing Beat the Quarters. If you don't like to do the math and roll the dice, if you more want to just focus on the combat but still have all that depth in the background with those guns and so on. Again, sorry for my ahs and ums. You know, I am not native English speaking, but I'll do my best. And for a while earlier on, I was using text-to-speech. So if you watch some of my earlier movies, you will see that I'm using this text-to-speech that I quite enjoy. But I had a vote at some point there, and much more people prefer to just hear my voice. So that's why I'm using it for now. Well, fair winds, and I'll see you in the next one.